Some stories are not loud. They don't scream. They don't demand attention. They live quietly in the heart, waiting for the silence to break. This is one of those stories. He spent 27 years in prison. What Nelson Mandela became after will leave you speechless. Nelson Mandela, the long walk through the dark. The prison door slammed with a finality that echoed through Nelson Mandela's bones. In that moment, the world he knew collapsed into a narrow cell. Cold stone, and years he could not yet imagine. He was not just losing his freedom. He was stepping into a test that would stretch the limits of the human spirit. Robben Island was designed to break men. The sea wind cut through thin prison clothes. The limestone quarry burned the eyes. And silence was used as punishment. Every day, Mandela chipped stone under the sun. His hands blistered, his body aging faster than time allowed. Letters from his family were censored or delayed for years. News of his children growing up reached him in fragments. His mother died. His son died. He was not allowed to attend their funerals. Anger lived with him at first. It slept beside him on the hard floor and followed him into the quarry. It would have been easy to let it turn into hatred. But Mandela made a quiet decision in that cell. His captors would not own his heart, even if they owned his body. Instead of shrinking, he studied. He observed the guards, learning their fears and weaknesses, calling them by name, speaking to them with respect they did not expect. Slowly, something changed. Power shifted not in the keys they held, but in the dignity he refused to surrender. Within the prison walls, he became a leader again, settling disputes, teaching younger inmates, reminding them that they were more than prisoners, they were men with a future. Years blurred into decades. His hair turned gray. His walk slowed. The world outside changed without him, yet his name grew stronger. While he was locked away, an entire nation began to believe that freedom had his face. After 27 years, the gates finally opened. Cameras flashed. Crowds roared. But Mandela stepped into the light without revenge in his eyes. What shocked the world was not that he survived prison. It was that prison did not poison him. He spoke of reconciliation when the country expected retribution. He chose unity when division was easier. The man who had been locked in a cell now carried a nation on his shoulders. When he was sworn in as president of South Africa, he did not stand as a conqueror. He stood as proof that suffering can either harden a person or refine them. Proof that patience can outlast cruelty. Proof that forgiveness can be a form of power. Nelson Mandela's greatest victory was not becoming president. It was emerging from 27 years of darkness without losing the light within him. And in choosing grace over bitterness, he did not just free a nation. He showed the world what true leadership looks like. Please like and subscribe, it really helps, thank you. The presidency did not erase the weight of those years. Mandela carried prison with him not as a wound, but as wisdom. Every meeting, every decision, was shaped by the memory of what unchecked power could do to human lives. South Africa stood on the edge of collapse. Decades of division had left the country raw and suspicious. Many expected revenge. Some demanded it. The air was thick with fear that freedom would turn into chaos. Mandela chose a harder path. He invited his former enemies to the table, men who once signed orders that kept him behind bars now found themselves shaking his hand. To many, it felt like betrayal. To Mandela, it was strategy rooted in humanity. He understood something few leaders do. You cannot build the future by humiliating those who must live in it with you. When the nation's rugby team wants a symbol of white dominance played in the World Cup, Mandela wore their jersey. It was a simple act, but it shook the country. In that moment, millions saw what leadership could look like, not loud, not violent, but deeply intentional. A signal that South Africa belonged to all who called it home. At night, when the crowds were gone and the cameras turned away, Mandela sometimes returned in his mind to that small prison cell. He remembered the silence, the loneliness, the years stolen. But he also remembered the promise he made to himself that if he ever walked free, he would not be a slave to bitterness. Freedom, he learned, was not the absence of chains. It was the discipline to rise above them. He governed for one term only, stepping aside when he could have stayed. Power, to him, was never meant to be clutched, it was meant to be transferred. In doing so, he taught another lesson, that democracy survives when leaders know when to let go. Long after he left office, Mandela's presence lingered, not in monuments or speeches, but in the quiet courage of ordinary people choosing dialogue over violence, patience over rage, hope over fear. His life became a reminder whispered across generations that a single human being, armed with resolve and compassion, can endure unimaginable darkness and still emerge, capable of lighting the way for others. And so, Nelson Mandela's story did not end with a prison gate opening or a presidency beginning. It lived on in every act of reconciliation, every difficult conversation, and every choice to believe that even the most broken societies can be made whole again. Years turned into decades, and Mandela's story became legend.
But he remained, at heart, the same man who had walked into that prison with a quiet resolve. He traveled the world, not as a conqueror, but as a messenger of possibility. Leaders sought his counsel, yet he spoke more often to ordinary people, students, workers, mothers, children, reminding them that change begins in the small choices of daily life. He visited schools and townships, sometimes in worn shoes, sometimes in the same calm smile that had carried him through the hardest years. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was never to boast, but to challenge. It always seems impossible until it is done. Even as his body weakened, Mandela never retreated from the world. His hands, once scarred from labor, now shook hands with peacekeepers, Nobel laureates, and those who had once doubted him. Each meeting was a chance to show that endurance and empathy were not weaknesses, they were tools of transformation. But his greatest triumph remained the unseen victories. A former guard learning to respect a prisoner, a country choosing forgiveness over vengeance, children growing up knowing the word apartheid only as history, not reality. That was the legacy no medal or title could ever capture. In the quiet of his final years, Mandela often reflected on the long journey, the pain, the waiting, the loss, the small victories that had piled upon one another until they became monumental. He realized that prison had not broken him, it had taught him patience, resilience, and the radical power of hope. And when the time came for him to leave the world, it was not with bitterness or regret, but with peace. His life had been a testament that one human being, faced with the worst the world could offer, could still choose light. That suffering, when met with courage, could become a bridge rather than a barrier. Nelson Mandela had walked through the darkest corridors of human cruelty and emerged, not just unbroken, but radiant. And in that radiance, he left behind a simple, enduring truth. Freedom is never given, it is claimed by those brave, enough to endure, to forgive, and to lead with love. For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and promotes the freedom of others. Nelson Mandela.